Now another food we brought with us from Eastern Europe is the pickle, right? 1925, 37, 49, 61, 73. Who's a pickle here? We have a lot of pickles today. You're the perfect sidekick. Friends love your salty wit and snappy banter, but you never overshadow them. That shows genuine seasoning from when you were a cucumber. Marry a pastrami later in life. You're sitting next to your husband, aren't you? I'm in trouble. Okay. We had to know how to pickle in Eastern Europe because we had no refrigeration. We had to take the foods and the bounty of the spring and the summer and preserve them for the fall and the winter. In fact, if you were a kid in the Lower East Side, your mother would give you a penny, and you'd buy a piece of candy, and you would buy a pickle. And in fact, the Americans who were second, third, fourth generation would look at us Jews, and they would derisively call us pickle eaters. So there's Gus of Gus's Pickles, which is no longer on the Lower East Side, but across in Brooklyn. And there's the pickle guys, they're still there. And you remember the wooden barrel. I grew up in Philadelphia when I was very young, and my first memory of a deli was a deli with sawdust on the floor. I was about 5. And you'd walk into the deli, and the first thing you would see is the pickle barrels. And as a kid, you know, if you wanted a fresh pickle, you just reached right in and got it. And if you wanted a sour pickle, you reached all the way in. So now the wooden barrels have been replaced by the red barrels, but still great stuff. And pickling, everyone in Brooklyn is pickling right now. So there were other pushcart guys. There was the bagel man, and there was the herring man. He would have the pickled herring, and he'd wrap it up in newspaper like a cone, and you could just eat it on your way. Now, here's a moving picture by Thomas Edison that he made in 1903, one of the earliest pictures ever. It's called Move On. It's a street scene in New York, and you see all the pushcart vendors. They're being told by the policemen to move on because this was such an easy entry into business life in New York City that there ended up becoming too many pushcarts. And so the city in 1906 said, you know what, we've got too many pushcarts, we're going to start regulating them, we're only going to give out a certain number of licenses. And you can see in the right-hand corner, there's the Keystone Cop there, wagging his billy club. I mean, it almost looks comic, but that's, I guess, how they were. And he's telling all the pushcart vendors to move on. Not only that, but they sort of left things on the road, and it was very difficult. So, but you had to... Exactly. So they say you've got to have you have to have a license, and not only that, you have to stay in one spot. What is the point of a pushcart if you can't push it? So that is why Jonas Schimmel and so many of these vendors, after 1906, open up their own stores. Because if they've got to stay in one spot, at least they should have a roof over their head. So that's the first stage, that's the first generation of Jews that come over from Eastern Europe. Second stage, adaptation. Now when I think of adaptation, of all the Jewish Zodiac foods, I think of pastrami. Okay? 1927, 39, 51, 63, 75, we have pastramis here. Yes, we have pastramis. Brisket's hipper sibling, always smoking and ready to party. You spice up life even though you keep your parents up late at night. Compatible with pickle, who's always by your side. So if we have any single people here who are pickles or pastrami, you guys have to get together. So, pastrami, it means to preserve. That's the root of the word, and it's not unlike pickling. That's why they're so close. Now, Tevye would not take his cow and kill it in order to have a pastrami sandwich. They did not use cows for pastrami. What do you think they used in Eastern Europe to make pastrami out of? Goats. Chicken is close, and sometimes they probably did, but actually geese. Geese. I have a hard time believing this, but it's true. Geese. And we know this because of this book, the Settlement Cookbook. How many of you have it, or you know grandparents who have this book? How many goose recipes are in that book, right? In Eastern Europe, our goose was cooked. Okay, so pastrami. Pastrami symbolizes the great abundance that is here for us as immigrants here in America. Our hopes and dreams are as piled high as the slices in a pastrami sandwich. And our hopes and dreams were paved with gold, especially if you were a kosher meat manufacturer, because they had pretty much, a license to print money. In fact, there were 4 major meat riots when the price of kosher meat went up, and people would riot, and they had to reduce the price. The most famous riot occurs in 1910, where the women of the Lower East Side are so enraged that they go to every shop owner and anyone who's carrying meat, kosher meat. They take the meat away from them, they knock it on the ground, they douse it with kerosene, and they light it on fire. And this is from the New York Times, actually. And that is not how we get the term hot pastrami. But, you talk about prices, they really did something about the prices. Now, Isaac Gellis was a meat manufacturer. Who knows Isaac Gellis? Hot dogs? Yes, okay. Are you from New York? Yeah, okay, so you know him. Isaac Gellis made a lot of money in the meat manufacturing business, and he gave a lot of his money to the Elder Street Synagogue, which is in Chinatown, and it's still there. It's now the museum on Elder Street, and if you ever go there, you will see this new stained glass window that they just put in about a year ago. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful museum, and in fact, they have an egg rolls and egg cream festival every year because it's in Chinatown. It used to be a Jewish neighborhood, now it's a Chinese neighborhood, so they celebrate the ethnicities. So we adapt. We adapt with pastrami. We also adapt to our culture. The Christian Holy Trinity, right? The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. There's a Jewish Holy Trinity. Bagels, lox, and cream cheese. One bite and you will find God. Now, you would think, bagels, lox, and cream cheese, we've been eating that for centuries. You would be wrong. We have not been eating that for centuries. We've been eating something like it, but not that. And we'll explain why. So, year of the lox, 1930, 42, 54, 66. Who's the lox here? Okay, a couple loxes. Thin and rich, you're very high maintenance. You're like nothing more than basking in the heat getting color. Consider retiring to Boca. Compatible with bagel and schmear, although you top them. So, lox was actually relatively inexpensive in the day because they would get it in the Pacific Northwest, they would put it in barrels, the salmon, they would throw salt on it, they'd put it on the railroad, and because it was salted and brined, it would make its way across the country without needing refrigeration. And you would go to an appetizing store to get it. You wouldn't go to a deli. Now, Russ and Daughters on Houston Street, right near Yonah Schimmel's, Joel Russ was he had a push cart, and he sold herring, and then he eventually had his store. Now, the term appetizing refers to a store like this, where you basically get cream cheese and lox and fish. You can get all sorts of fish. And in fact, the old-fashioned belly lox, that's true lox. Most of what we eat today is smoked salmon. It's not really salted. The old-fashioned belly lox is saltier, it's fattier, and if you're an old-timer, there's nothing like it. You can get all sorts of cream cheeses, and you can get sandwiches like the Yom Kippur and the Fancy Delancey, and my favorite, which is the Meshuggah, which is a ½ pound of sable and lox, anything you want on a sandwich. It only costs $19.95. But that is what an appetizing store is. And if you're from back east, and if you go down to Florida or even some in the Midwest, you'll see bagels and appetizing. You'll see that associated with bagel shops. That's where that term appetizing comes from. Or you go to Zabar's, you get the appetizing section.